Hey there, how are you doing? Hope you are all having a good day. Last summer, I grew some David Austin roses in containers, and this one that I'm pruning right here is Harlow Carr, which has beautiful mid-pink blooms that performed really well for me all summer. But when fall came, I decided to move it from the container to in-ground. And this video is going to show you how I did that. The best and easiest way for me to move it out of the container is to tip the container over and remove the soil that way bit by bit. I get asked sometimes about what containers I use and the size of my containers. This one is plastic and it is 20 inches tall and wide. The reason I chose to use plastic containers is because they're light but strong and sturdy, and they're very weather resistant. I don't have to worry about them cracking under freezing temperatures or when I have to move them around. It's easier for me to do that by myself without having to ask for help. Also, I feel like plastic is better than terracotta or ceramic pots because it can take some rough handling, and it is also able to hold moisture better than terracotta or ceramic pots, I find. What I'm doing here is trying to get the soil out as gently as possible. But usually with transplanting, no matter how careful you are, chances are the plant will probably experience transplant shock. And most of the time, the plants will recover from it just fine if you transplant it at the right time of year. When I first started gardening a few years ago, I didn't know about transplant shock. So when I transplanted some things in the garden to a new place and I saw that it started losing all the leaves, pretty much it looked like it was dying. My heart sank because I thought I had killed it. So if you're experiencing this, my advice is to just wait. Patience is key in this matter, and transplant shock is a very common thing. So let's talk about the best time to transplant your shrub rose. So generally speaking, you don't want to do this in the middle of the hottest months or the coldest months. So in my zone, I'm gardening in zone 8 in the Pacific Northwest region. I will never transplant anything in my garden in the months of June, July, August, because these months are way too hot. And same thing with the winter months, like December, January, February. So these months with potential extreme temperatures, whether hot or cold, are definitely a no-go. You also want to make sure that the plant has at least a few weeks to settle in their new spot before summer or winter sets in. So I chose to move my Harlow Carr in late October, so it would have the whole month of November to settle in its new home. Next question that people often wonder is what kind of soil to use for your roses in containers. So for me personally, for these roses, I use Miracle Grow moisture control soil that happened to be on sale at my local Costco at the time. I have in the past used regular Miracle Grow potting mix. That worked well also. And in my opinion, any potting mix actually has worked well for me in the past, as long as it is well draining and it is rich in nutrients. So if I see a local potting mix that is on sale, I will usually grab that. Pretty much any potting mix really that is on sale whenever I go shopping is what I usually get. Next thing you want to do after you pick out your potting mix is to make sure that your container drains well. That it has enough holes in it and the bottom, and that these holes won't get clogged up as time goes by. Now, let's take a look at how big the root system grew after one season of growing. So Harlow Carr bare roots arrived at my house on March 31st of 2021. I planted it the next day in this container, along with 2 other roses, which were Olivia Rose Austin and Princess Alexandra of Kent. Now I'm taking out Harlow Carr from its container. So here's the root system. This is how big it grew after how many months from March to October. So clearly this size container is big enough for you to grow a shrub rose. And if you ask me, I think this shrub rose would be okay in this container for at least 2 to 3 growing seasons before it gets root bound and before you have to take it out and change out the soil or trim the roots. After 2 to 3 years, the soil will probably be depleted of nutrients and you will have to change the soil to keep your plants looking robust and healthy. So now that I have Harlow Carr out of its container, I'm going to move it to the front of the house, which is the part of my driveway, which I think is a much better spot for this rose. I decided to move Harlow Carr out of the container because while it's a very beautiful rose, and it's a very fragrant rose, it's quite thorny. And this container, the white container, is located near my garden hose. So every time I go to turn on the hose, I usually get scraped by Harlow Carr's thorns, which I didn't like that. So this new location is going to be perfect for it because it's alongside my driveway, and that's not the area that I walk by too often. So it can grow freely and be as thorny as it wants. But first, I have to remove this shrub that I grew last summer in this area, and I have to put it somewhere else. I forget what the name of the shrub is called, but it's actually not in a good location right now at the moment because this area gets a lot of sun. And this is a shrub that grows well or grows better in a shade condition. So we're going to do that first. I have to dig a much deeper hole here because roses have kind of like a deeper root system. So the hole has to be deep enough and wide enough for the roots to thrive. So that's what I'm going to do. This area that I'm about to dig, this whole area used to be just a long patch of grass along the driveway. And last spring, I decided that it looked too plain and too boring because it was just a patch of grass. So I wanted to dig out the whole thing and planted a whole lot of like pollinator attracting plants in this area. But the problem was that it was so rocky. I live in an area that has very poor rocky soil. And maybe that's because of Mount Rainier, which is an active volcano. People say that our area has volcanic soil, which means that there are a lot of rocks underneath. It could also be because I live in a cookie cutter development, and maybe the construction company just decided to dump a bunch of rocks on my foundation. But I want to show you the amount of rocks that I had to dig up. So this pile of rocks came from this area alone on this side, and I have another side on my driveway that I dug up. I jumped in on this project with all the energy in the world when I decided to do this. And then a week in, I realized it was such an arduous task for my body. And I almost gave up because my back was hurting so much. And I was doing this all by myself. It took me about 3 whole weeks of just coming out here and digging an hour or two every day. And so I started in March and I finished in April, which was by the time it was within like the growing season. So anyway, it was over and I was so happy. But in this area that I'm digging for my new rose, I'm going to have to dig much deeper than I did before. And once I'm happy with the depth of the new hole, I'm going to mix in with the original soil some bagged soil conditioner. Soil conditioner, what is that? Soil conditioners are soil amendments that improve the soil structure by increasing aeration, drainage, water holding capacity, and nutrients. It's usually made up of recycled or aged forest products or finely ground tree trimmings, something like that, and sometimes maybe some composted chicken manure. This soil conditioner that I use, it works wonders, breaking up compacted hard clay soil, which is what I have here. I know my soil leans towards the clay side because last March when I was out here digging one day in the rain, I saw my soil while it was wet, and it felt like I was looking at a big concrete slab in my hand, and it felt like that too. So I was like, okay, I need to amend this soil before I plant anything. So we all want our plants to have good soil, right? Especially for roses who love rich soil. So what is good soil? Good soil for plants is usually composed of 50% organic or inorganic material, 25% air space, and 25% water space. Clay or hard compacted soils, they have little to no space for air and water, which isn't ideal for the millions tiny microorganisms that live in the soil. They're like, these guys are like little minions that are the backbone of your plant's vigor. You may be wondering, what's the difference between soil conditioner and fertilizer? Like, can I not just do that with fertilizer by just feeding it, by adding nutrients? Which is, true. Fertilizer adds nutrients. But if you have a hard clay soil like I do, these nutrients can become locked up and they won't be available to the plants because it's all blocked up by these hard soil. Like it won't penetrate through. So the best course of action is to amend the soil first, and then you can start your fertilizing regime. Before using soil conditioner in the garden, if you want to be super exact, you could get your soil tested and to know exactly what kind of soil you have and what is the right soil condition to use. As for me, in my case, I'm kind of playing the guessing game here. I'm going with my gut feeling that I have clay soil, so I'm adding this soil conditioner made locally here in my area. This company is called PNW's Own Organics, and it's specifically formulated for the Pacific Northwest region. So I guess I'll soon find out how it does. And since we're on the topic of soil amendments, I guess I'll also talk about compost. So what's the difference between compost and soil conditioner? When I first started gardening a few years ago, I was so confused. It took a lot of reading for me to finally get the gist. And up until today, I still have a lot of questions every time I stand at a garden center looking at 30 different types of bagged soil and compost, okay? But anyway, here's what I understand so far. So both soil conditioner and compost are types of soil amendments. They're both used to make your soil better, and they should be used at different stages of planting. Compost is mostly decomposed organic matter. It can also break up heavy clay soil, and it can help improve drainage. But because it's made up of like finer material than soil conditioner, it doesn't provide the same degree of aeration that the barky soil conditioners do. So soil conditioners are usually, like I said before, composed of aged or recycled forest products, bark, like heavier larger material than compost. So it helps a lot with like breaking up, loosen up like hard clay soil. Compost also has more nutrients than soil conditioner. And whereas it might sound like a good thing to mix your original soil with compost right away at first planting, it's actually not too good. Like too much compost in your soil all at once, especially at the deeper level, can actually do more harm than good. So the gist of it is, a soil conditioner is usually added when you first begin to amend your soil or create a new planting bed, if your existing soil conditions require it. If you're blessed with nice, well-draining soil to begin with, you can entirely skip this process of adding soil conditioner. Compost can and should be added at any time when amending a new planting area as the nutrient-rich top dressing. There's no need to dig your soil or disturb your plant roots or the microorganisms in the soil to get the compost in. You can simply just lay a layer of compost in your bed or border and rely on the little worms to do their job of bringing down the nutrients. So every time I start planting a new shrub, I think of the whole thing like this, okay? You ready? This has potential to sound really silly. I think of myself as like a good Samaritan, helping strangers build their first house from scratch. And then to help them have good foundation, I give them soil conditioner. And once the house is, up and in and ready to be moved in, the residents will move in. And then, as a housewarming gift, I bring them food, which is compost. But instead of shoving this food down their throats or force them to eat it, I just simply lay the food there and I leave. And I let them eat on their own time when they're ready. But to help them preserve their food and water, I bring them a lid, which is a layer of mulch that I lay on top of the compost. And once or twice a year, the residents maybe they will want to expand their house a little bit by adding a deck or a patio or a swimming pool or a greenhouse. And that's when a good and kind Samaritan like myself will provide extra funding, which is fertilizer. And that's how I remember what to use, when to use. Well, let's see how my Harlow Carr is doing. It's mid-February and I see some sign of new growths, which means it survived the transplant. Yay! I'll see how it does this summer and maybe I'll report back. Well, thanks for gardening with me today, guys. Hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.